Today is the second day of the sentencing hearing for the man found guilty of killing 4 members of a Muslim family in London, Ontario. The Afzaal family was killed while out for an evening walk in June 2021. The attack also left a 9-year-old boy badly injured and orphaned. Over the last 2 days, London Superior Court has heard from family, friends, and community members about how the crime has impacted them and the Muslim community. On the way into the courtroom today, Nathaniel Veltman's lawyers commented on the emotions being heard in court.
These people are very articulate and very eloquent about these events and how it's moved them, touched them, and affected their lives. And it's heartrending to hear them. And it's, as I said before, I mean, the real issue is the sub-theme for everybody seems to be vulnerability, and they feel unsafe now. So that's what's really unsettling for everybody, all Canadians.
The attack triggered national calls to combat Islamophobia. A representative of the National Council of Canadian Muslims spoke in London yesterday about what needs to happen now.
What this trial has highlighted for us is that you cannot legislate your way out of hatred, especially of the extreme kind. With enough hatred, anything is a weapon and nobody is safe. So what we desperately need, in addition to policy and legal reform, is to reckon with ourselves as a society.
Also there today was Amira Elghawaby, Canada's Special Representative on combating Islamophobia. We spoke earlier and I asked about her experience listening to those impact statements.
We heard, in the words of now an 11-year-old, describing what it is like for him to no longer be able to talk to his mom and dad, no longer, to imagine what it will be like to grow up with his sister. She had told him that she would be helping him with his driving lessons one day, that she would be spending that kind of time, things that you take for granted as a sibling, looking forward to. So hearing that impact statement as a final kind of words from the courtroom really resonated immensely for everyone. You could hear people sniffling and tears rolling down faces, the family members, the families, and representatives from the community. So, the profound impact of this hateful attack, continues to reverberate in London.
Ms. Elghawaby, you called this a time to reflect as a nation on how we ensure this never happens again. So where do you think the country stands when it comes to fighting Islamophobia?
Absolutely, Brett. There's a lot of work to do. Sadly, we actually are seeing a rise in Islamophobia even as we speak. We continue to see issues of harassment of women who wear the hijab, for example, like what I'm wearing today, feeling worried about their sense of safety, whether it's thinking about, will someone try to hit them with their vehicle in a similar manner as happened on June 6th, or whether, women have reported being spat on, for instance. And even in the past few months, as we've seen, unfortunately, conflicts, in the Middle East since October 7th, we've seen the climate really worsen, in fact, for members of Canada's Muslim communities alongside Jewish communities as well. So we continue to grapple with Islamophobia. We continue to look for policy changes. In fact, when I was speaking with one of the family members, Mediha's uncle, in fact, who gave his statement yesterday, he told me that part of the healing from this horrific crime is seeing, fellow Canadians standing together, shoulder to shoulder, in their commitment to stand against hatred, to stand against Islamophobia, whether it is through education in our schools and our universities, whether it's through all the work we do in our places of work and employers, their role in being leaders against any types of violations of human rights and discrimination that we might see. The type of work we have to do as a society to address this kind of hate is deep, and it really is a collective thing that we must take on. For instance, we heard today as well from the witness who came across this crime and saw the family members after being struck. And she herself, who's not a member of the Muslim community, she's a member of London's community, and said for her, the sense of faith in Canada as a place where people of all backgrounds can continue to contribute and be who they are has been deeply shaken by what happened.
Well,
and
I
that
want to follow up there if I can.
Yes.
You describe a climate that's worsening, but do you feel there has been any progress made since your appointment, let's say?
I mean, progress, it's difficult. It's difficult to really identify progress. On the one hand, we acknowledge the reality of Islamophobia. It's surprising, but it actually took this tragedy several years ago, 2.5 years ago, for all of Canadian society, including our leaders, to acknowledge even the word itself is the way that we describe this type of discrimination, that we've actually seen over the years some contestation of the term itself. So the progress that we're seeing in acknowledging that this is a form of hatred that exists in our society alongside other forms of hatred that we need to tackle, that's progress. The establishment of the office came about following this tragedy, where we had hundreds of recommendations made by community members saying to the federal government, we need to see action, we need to see that commitment. And our office continues to advocate on behalf of our communities to ensure that policies that can impact people's sense of safety, well-being, and inclusion are addressed, and working very closely. Of course, I report to Minister Kamal Kira, who is Canada's Minister of Diversity and Inclusion and Persons with Disabilities, and her commitment and the government's commitment to addressing Islamophobia and all forms of hate is one that continues to propel this work. But it's not a one person or one office. This is a collective responsibility that we have, and Canada is a nation built together with our Indigenous communities as a place where people of all backgrounds and religions can contribute positively. And this has shaken that sense of belonging and inclusion that we all have a right to feel.
I want to move on to a related subject. Later this month, the lawyers are expected to present arguments about whether this attack constituted terrorism. It's important to remember that terrorism is defined in Canada's criminal code. What significance do you think labeling or finding that this was terrorism could have?
Yes, it will be an important decision that we hear from the justice who has, for the past 2 days, heard directly from how this criminal act has indeed terrorized members of not only London's Muslim communities, but we also heard from members of the Sikh community here in London, the Jewish community here in London, who described how just being, a member of another community, how, that otherization, that the feeling of vulnerability simply for being different. And so not only do Muslims in London feel that they were terrorized by this, but other communities as well feel that way. But whether or not the judge will include that in her sentencing decision on January 23rd will remain to be seen. It will be an important message to say that such a crime based on white supremacist ideas, that we know that the convicted killer had a deep hatred for Muslims, that he specifically targeted this family out for an evening stroll that night. He saw them in their traditional clothing, wearing hijab, wearing clothing that marked them as Muslim, and he deliberately turned his truck around to strike them, to try to, snuff out these lives, and succeeded with 4 of the 5 family members. And so, from the community's perspective, this was an act that terrorized people until now. People still have trouble sleeping, have trouble walking in their communities, have trouble going to places of worship. The impacts have been felt, and hate crimes are message crimes, and the message has been loud and clear. And so what we heard today was a call for the justice system to send its own message that such terrorizing activity, such terrorizing crime has no place in our society and has to face the fullest consequence.
All right, unfortunately, on that note, we are out of time for this segment. Thank you, Amira Elghawaby, Canada's Special Representative on Combating Islamophobia.
Thank you so much, Brett.